The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone to the March Volunteer Match webinar and Best Practice Network webinar. We are excited to have Linda Gornitsky, President of LBG Associates, join us for motivating volunteers in tough times. We're going to wait a few more seconds and let people log in and get organized, and then we'll get started. All right, I want to do a quick logistical test just to be sure the audience can see my screen and hear me okay. So if you audience members can type into their question box, just say I can see the screen or I can hear you, and then we'll get moving. Oh, questions are starting to come in. Oh, all right, looks like we're good to go. So another reminder, if you have questions about Linda's presentation, type them into the question box and we will save them for the Q&A section at the end of the presentation, as well as if you have any technical questions, type those in and we will respond to you. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Gornitsky. She is the president and founder of LBG Associates, started in 1993. It's a consulting firm that specializes in developing strategic corporate citizenship and community relations programs. Linda's been in the field for a long time, and this is one of her recent research projects that she'll be presenting on today. So without further ado, I will hand over the controls to you, Linda.
Thank you, Megan, and welcome everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to share, as Megan said, our latest study, which is called Motivating Volunteering in Tough Times. I'm just waiting for it to move. Just a little bit very quickly about the report itself. It is really a comprehensive review and analysis of results that we got from employees and volunteer managers. It contains quotes from participants, key findings, key opportunities, conclusions, and recommendations. But what we're going to cover today is looking at the employee responses and just the highlights because of the amount of time that we had. I sort of chose the areas that I thought would be of most interest to people on the call. We're also going to look at what the volunteer managers said in comparison to what the employees said, and then hopefully we'll have time for some Q&A at the end. But why did we undertake this study? Because LBG Associates does many studies. In fact, this is our 9th landmark study. And the idea behind this study sort of occurred to me in late 2008 and early 2009 when we were in the throes of our recession. And I had seen on the New York Times an article about volunteering and that corporate giving was down, but that volunteerism was really going to pick up the slack. At the same time, you had President Obama with his service platform, and so it seemed that that volunteerism was in fact going to be this panacea. But given that perhaps the researcher in me began to question some of this, and I thought, you know, is this really true? Is volunteerism going to be the answer? Or perhaps are employees afraid to volunteer during these tough economic times? And so the central questions for the research were, how motivated are employees to volunteer, and what types of motivations work? Do we need to do things differently now that we're in tough economic times than we did prior to this? And so we decided to undertake this study. Now, what makes this study unique from all the other research that we and others have done in the area of volunteerism is that we captured both employee voices and volunteer managers. And prior to this, the three huge volunteer studies that we had done, we always spoke solely to volunteer managers. But this time, as you can see, we captured over 8,000 employee voices and over 213 volunteer managers. This came from 36 different companies, and this research took place in June and July of last year. Just really quickly, we always like to thank our sponsors. Without their help, the research is not possible. And just a quick look at who participated in the study. And as you can see, there's really a wide range of companies in terms of both size and industries represented. So what did we find? Well, we're going to start first with what the employees said, because I think this is the area that was truly novel about the research. Good news. The majority of employees say that support for volunteering is part of their company's values. And so I think that for those corporate people on the phone, you should feel very proud that employees feel that volunteerism is sort of part of the DNA of the company. Perhaps even better news is that 71% of the employees say that volunteerism makes them feel more positive about their company. Now, this is something that we usually say is one of the benefits of volunteerism, but again, it's generally based on what volunteer managers think employees feel. And here we're actually hearing it from the employees, and they're saying that, yes, volunteerism does make them feel more positive. This is important, and it helps build the business case for volunteer managers within companies. The economy did make an impact on employees. Half of them said that that volunteering for company-sponsored programs is more important because of the challenging economy. And also the majority said that they are, in fact, participating in their company's volunteer program. But when we look at the numbers a little bit more carefully, yes, 55% or a majority do say that, but 45% are not volunteering. And so I think here is an opportunity for us to reach out and try and capture those employees who are not participating in our events. When we ask them why they don't volunteer, as you can see, 2/3 are saying it's because of personal reasons, and only 1/3 because of work-related reasons. What motivates an employee to volunteer in a company-sponsored event? I found this a little bit surprising, but not entirely, and the main motivator is that the cause is important to the employee. And we do know that, in general, people volunteer at organizations because they feel passionate about the issue or cause. So this makes great sense that employees would feel the same way. The next two motivators or reasons for participating have to do with the economy. And one is that the organizations are experiencing economic hardship and they want to help out. And then the second one being that volunteering results for a donation. So again, some type of monetary reward going to the nonprofit. But it's the fourth one that I really want to bring our attention to, which is that the cause is important to my company. Because even though we know that the number one reason is that the employee cares about the cause, if you have 50,000 employees, 100,000 employees, that means that there's 50,000 or 100,000 causes. And if you're trying to develop a volunteer program, and in particular a strategic volunteer program, then clearly you cannot respond to every employee's passion. So the fact that the cause is important to the company is a fairly strong motivator for employees to get involved, I think is very important for volunteer managers to keep in mind. So now we're going to do a polling question. and the question has to do with recognition. And so what we would like you to do is to rate how important you think recognition is as a motivator for employees. And Megan, do you want to say something about this?
Sure. We're just going to launch the poll. We'll give you a few minutes to respond, and then we'll close it. And Linda, you'll be able to give us your analysis on the response.
Terrific. Megan, do the results come up online, or do I just need to read them?
They will show up on the screen, and you'll be able to see them.
Okay, good.
As will the rest of the audience. Okay, well, closing it now.
Okay, so as we can see, in terms of how important we think, 24% extremely important, and very important and important over a third. So what we're saying is that I guess 92% of us feel that recognition is either important or very important or extremely important, but certainly important to our employees. Terrific. Well, let's go back to the research, and we'll see what employees are saying.
Linda, the slides will follow in just a second.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sometimes it takes a second.
Okay. And not to sort of affect what you're going to see next, but recognition was something that we were very interested in exploring, and the results that we got were most surprising. So as soon as we can get the slides back up, we can share that with you.
Linda, which slide would you like to be on now?
The one following the poll.
A big surprise?
Yes.
Okay. Can you see that screen?
No. My screen says go to webinar, joining webinar, launch successful.
Okay. I'm giving.
Linda, do you see in your the bottom of your computer screen 2 go-to-webinars? One should be that you're launching, and one should be that you're...
oh, okay. I can get rid of this then.
No, I would both up, but just select the one.
I have on my screen now a big surprise.
Wonderful. All right, I'm passing the controls back to you.
Okay, thank you.
There you go.
Sorry about all the technical problems for those of you who are still with us. Okay, so what motivates employees? All right, we feel that recognition is a very important motivator. But in fact, what we found is that that's not really true, and that company recognition for volunteering was number 10 out of 18 possible motivators, and recognition from the charity was number 11. So what was the number one motivator? Well, it was not recognition. And let me tell you why that was so surprising for us. In 2004, we did a study called Measuring Corporate Volunteerism, where we used a regression analysis to try and find out what predicts a successful volunteer program. And our interest was to say, you know, if I can't do 12 different things and there was only one thing that I could do to help make my volunteer program successful, what should that be? And based on this regression analysis, which took information from volunteer managers, what we found out was that recognition was the number one predictor of a successful volunteer program. But that's not what we found. We found that personal recognition was secondary to the need to help nonprofits financially. And so here are the numbers. A donation made to my charity when I volunteer is the number one motivator for employees. So they want to be able to financially help the charity in addition to what they're doing in terms of sweat equity. Then the next most important is internal communication that recognizes the employee's participation, and that's something that we would expect. What was interesting that a letter from the senior management or a letter from the supervisor, again, not all that important, and then any type of event honoring the employees, again, not that important. So out of a possible rating of 5, we're seeing that those are below a 3. So just if there was one major takeaway from this research that I would love for you to think about, which is that the traditional types of recognition that we think about, formal, informal recognition, were not as powerful as making a donation to the employee's charity of choice. Now, in terms of workday volunteering, because this, again, was something we were very interested in looking at given the recession, we found that more than a third are allowed to volunteer during the workday, but only a little more than half are taking advantage of this program. 26% were not allowed, and 40% don't even know if they're allowed. And again, of all these numbers, the 40% is the one that really stands out in my mind, because if we have this terrific program, and employees are not taking advantage of it, then that's not good. And clearly we need to increase our communication about this. Now, the other interesting thing is that nearly a third worry that their volunteering during the workday could negatively affect their job security. And again, we thought, okay, maybe this is part of the problem during the recession, is that everybody is in job preservation mode. And so would volunteering during the workday indicate that they have more time on their hands than perhaps management thought they had, which might mean that their jobs are expendable, and so therefore they don't want to volunteer during the workday. Now, again, you could say, well, it's only a third, but still a third is quite a large number. But what was very interesting is that more than 40% did not worry about this before the crisis. So we're saying that 40% did not feel this way a year ago. However, 48% did feel this way. So it seems that even though the economy has gotten is bad and perhaps has gotten worse, that employees. Some employees felt concerned about job preservation even before the recession hit. When we asked employees, why don't you use your workday volunteering, no surprise, 86% felt that they were too busy at work. And the other thing that I thought was interesting is if you go down to my manager will not let me use the time, many times we feel that that middle management is a block to allowing employees to volunteer. Many of them discourage it or at least don't encourage it. And according to employees, that doesn't seem to be as much of a problem as perhaps we thought it might be. One of the sort of up-and-coming areas right now is pro bono volunteering, and so we addressed that in this study as well. And we found that less than 5% of the employees are, in fact, participating in a pro bono based volunteering program, and of the employees whose companies do offer it, 41% are taking advantage of it. So even if companies are offering it, it looks like employees are not using it, again, which leads one to question why. One of the other things that we were very interested in, again, because of the recession, is when do employees actually perform their pro bono volunteering? Now, if you use the legal model, the pro bono generally takes place during the workday, and the nonprofit is considered a client and billed as sort of client work. What was happening in the corporations, and we've also just done a separate study on pro bono volunteering, is that we're finding that employees are doing a lot of the volunteering after work, on weekends, and essentially on their own time. And again, part of it being that they don't want to look like they've got extra time on their hands and therefore can do this work during the workday. Some companies don't sanction them doing it during the workday, so a lot of it is being done on off hours, and with a part of it being done during the workday, for example, if they need to attend a meeting at the nonprofit. In terms of companies having Dollars for Doers programs, 48% of the employees say that they are participating. And keep that number in mind because you will see that when we talk to the volunteer managers, that number looks very different. We asked employees about their willingness to volunteer during the turndown, and as you can see, 63% said it had no impact, but 23% said it had a positive impact, and 13% said it had a negative or very negative impact. So for the most part, the economy is not impacting employees' willingness to volunteer. Nor is it really affecting their time available to volunteer, which was, again, surprising. We thought that it would have a bigger impact than it did. But again, one could say that 27% felt that the economy was definitely having a negative implication with respect to them having time to volunteer during the workday. One of the things that I was interested in is whether or not if volunteering was included in performance evaluations, this would have a positive effect and encourage employees to volunteer. Now, as you can see, the vast majority of companies do not include any type of performance evaluation with volunteering within the performance evaluation. But what was even more interesting was that respondents are split as to whether or not this would in fact increase their motivation, with 52% saying that it would not and 48% saying that it would. So, I mean, we can look at this in a number of different ways, but even so, almost half are saying that, you know, if you did include some type of criteria in my performance evaluation, then I might be more interested in volunteering. Now, communication, we all know, is absolutely essential to the success of a volunteer event. And so we were interested in how are employees finding out. And no surprise, 71% say that they find out about it through email. 61% say that they get it from their colleagues through word of mouth. And we know through other research that this is a very powerful way of getting information out there. And 13% said that they find out from senior executive communications. But we were wondering if, given the recession, companies were beginning to think about sort of out-of-the-box ways of communicating, because we all know that, yes, we send emails, but employees tend to delete the emails, and then they say that they didn't know anything about the event, even though the manager claims that they sent out all this information. So in terms of just some interesting ways that companies are now communicating, many of them have dedicated volunteering websites. They have volunteer coordinators and sometimes advocates who go out and talk it up amongst their peers. Some are putting it in paycheck stub flyers. Obviously, social media messaging becoming more and more important. New employee orientation materials are now containing information about various events and Dollars for Doers programs, paid time off, closed circuit TV, and others. Now, just really quickly, in terms of who we spoke to with respect to the employees, as you can see, just over half were female. Most of them were between 42 and 53 years of age. But we did get some of the 18 to 29-year-olds, and then some, towards closer to retirement. And then in terms of the job titles, as you can see, the majority were associates, but again, we did get a range of others. Sorry. Okay, now let's turn to the volunteer managers. What were you saying, and how did what you say compare to what employees said? Well, we can see that there is definite agreement in terms of whether or not the company's values do in fact support volunteerism. But again, the volunteer managers were a little bit more positive about this than the employees. Similarly, even though employees feel that volunteering makes them feel more positive about the company, again, the managers overestimated perhaps the level of this positive feeling, thinking that 85% say that volunteering makes employees feel more positive, again, compared with the 71% of employees. In terms of whether or not volunteer managers felt that there was a change in participation, either positively or negatively as a result of the recession, 40% felt that it stayed the same, but they were pretty much equally divided in terms of about a quarter feeling that rates increased and a quarter feeling that rates had decreased. The fact that 12.5% did not know whether or not there was a change in participation, I thought was not good. So what are the reasons for the increased participation? Well, many of them felt it was the improved communication and the economy, and similarly, reasons for decreased participation, lack of time, and guess what? The economy. So clearly the economy is being cited as a reason for either increased or decreased participation. Now here's where the results become very interesting. Again, when we look at what motivates an employee to volunteer during for a company-sponsored event, we know that they feel very strongly that the cause needs to be important to them personally, and the volunteer managers felt exactly the same way. But look at number 2. According to volunteer managers, the next reason why employees volunteer is because they get paid time off during the workday. Well, as far as the employees are concerned, that's not that important to them. That was number 9 out of possible 18. And then we also thought that it had to do with recognition, which was number 4 according to volunteer managers, but number 10 for employees. And the fact that senior managers are endorsing the event was number 5 for the volunteer managers and number 12 for the employees. So we're seeing that there's a bit of a disconnect between what the managers thought and the employees thought. So we also asked it as an open-ended question, and the question was, what is the most important thing your company does to motivate you to volunteer? And we got thousands and thousands of responses. And so what we did is we categorized them into distinct categories or themes. And these were the themes. In terms of the volunteer managers, the way they motivate employees was through communication and promotion, providing time off to volunteer, management support, and recognition of volunteers. Look what the employees say. They say that what their companies do to motivate them, again, is communication, so we are in sync there. The second is company donations and grants to volunteering, so that comes up again, providing time off, and management support. So recognition of volunteers doesn't even come up at all for them. So what we're finding, again, is that recognition is being overestimated in terms of its impact by the volunteer managers. So again, if you remember what we talked about with the employees, we said a donation made to the employee's charity when he or she volunteers is number 1. As far as the employees are concerned. Number 3, as far as the volunteer managers think that internal communication, recognizing the employee's participation, is number 1, but it is not. It's number 2. And also, if you look at the rankings are hugely different, with it being a 4 in terms of the volunteer managers and only a 2.5 for employees. So again, the disconnect between what volunteer managers think employees want and what employees are saying they want. In terms of paid time off, the managers are saying that participation is about 11 to 20%, but again, you see 38% of the volunteer managers don't even know whether or not their employees are participating in paid time off. And again, I think that that's an issue that volunteer managers really need to focus on. In terms of why employees don't use the paid time off, there is agreement that it's because employees are too busy at work. But again, the numbers are very different in terms of percentages, where you've got 89% of volunteer managers saying that versus 54% of employees. And the fact that they don't know about the program is number 2 for both managers and employees. Now, the employees and managers both are in sync with respect to whether or not employees feel that volunteering could negatively affect their job security, with them both saying that about a third of employees feel that that is in fact the case. And what was interesting here is that a much higher percentage of employees felt this way before the crisis. Again, that thinking that volunteer managers could be out of touch, whereas the volunteer managers, only 21% felt that employees, were concerned about volunteering impacting their jobs. 46% of employees feel that way. So again, something that volunteer managers really do need to be focusing on is, how do I make my employees feel more comfortable that if they volunteer, that their jobs are not in jeopardy. Again, the volunteer managers were a little bit out of sync in terms of when employees are volunteering with respect to pro bono, with most of the volunteer managers feeling that it's happening during the workday and off hours, but we know that from the employees, most of it is in fact happening off hours. And so again, if this is a program that you want employees to be doing during the workday, they need to feel that they can do this, and communication needs to be going out to make them feel comfortable that they can do their pro bono activities during the workday. In terms of dollars for doers, employee had said that 48% of them are participating, and yet the volunteer managers are saying that less than 10% are in fact taking advantage of the Dollars for Doers program. And based on other research that we've done, this is probably a fairly accurate number. But what was, again, disturbing is that 61% didn't know the participation rates of their employees in their Dollars for Doers programs. So considering the importance that employees place on donations to nonprofits, we know that that's the way they like to be recognized, then the feeling is that clearly these programs are being underutilized, and that we probably should try and want to increase participation, given the fact that employees feel so strongly that they want money to be given to their nonprofits of choice. So our question is, why aren't employees participating? And again, the reasons, as we suspected, is that they really don't understand the program and how it works. So that's number one. And number two is perhaps they don't have the time to volunteer, during their off hours. But perhaps the opportunity is that if they did understand the program and how it works, perhaps the participation rates would go up. And again, given how important giving money to a nonprofit is to employees, one would hope that that would in fact be the case. So just looking at some of our demographics, we saw 61% of the volunteer managers are female, 39% male, and most of them were between the ages of 42 and 53. And again, in terms of titles, majority were managers. Okay, so just to sum up what we found, the key concern that we all have is, how do we improve our volunteering participation rates? It's a question that my clients are always asking me. It's, Linda, how do I get my rates up? And one of the things that I ask them is, well, have you surveyed your volunteers? Do you know what your employees want to do, what they like to do, when they want to do it, how they want to do it, who they want to volunteer with? And so I think that, and the answer is usually no, we haven't surveyed our employees. So I think that in order to get our participation rates up, we need to understand what motivates our employees to participate in company-sponsored events. So the key question here really is, does your program respond to your employees' current motivations for volunteering? And I guess you don't know that until you survey or have focus groups and get an opportunity to really hear back from your stakeholders. what our research has showed is that there are distinct disconnects between what volunteer managers think their employees want and what employees are really thinking and feeling. For example, volunteer managers overestimated the motivational power of recognition, the motivational power of paid time off, and the motivational power of senior management endorsement. And they underestimated the impact of the recession on community organizations, so where many employees are now feeling that their nonprofit of choice is really hurting economically. And therefore donations made for volunteering is very important, and we underestimated how important that is. And also the importance of a cause to the company, which again is important for us to know, because we can develop more strategic programs and not necessarily have to respond to every passion of our employees. And another huge finding is that we obviously need better two-way communication. We need it bottom up. So we need to understand what our employees are feeling, and we can do that from surveys and focus groups. And if possible, I would truly champion both. I think that employee surveys are wonderful, but what they give you is breadth. And often what we need is depth. We need to understand why employees feel the way we do. That's often difficult to get from the survey, but very easy to get through focus groups. And then we need much better top-down information. We know that employees are feeling a little bit insecure about their jobs. We need to reassure them that volunteering will not jeopardize their job, and in fact might even be seen as a positive, and that it could be helpful for them to volunteer. And one of the other things that came of this is that companies may need to adjust their communication focus. So for example, Nationwide Insurance was finding that their participation rates were waning, and they were very concerned clearly about this and went out to their employee base to sort of figure out why this was happening. And what they discovered is that they needed to change their communications. Rather than talking about how many employees had volunteered and what they did, they really needed to start focusing on the impact of the volunteering on the nonprofit and on the clients of that nonprofit, so that employees felt good about what they were doing. And as soon as they began to talk about impact and the difference that they were making in the community, their volunteering rates began to pick up. So finally, remember that what resonated with employees in 2007, 2008, or even 6 months ago in 2009 may not necessarily work today, which is why it is so important to keep track of what your employees are thinking and to adjust your volunteering programs accordingly. As I said, what I've given you now is really just a snapshot. If you want more information, then clearly please think about reading the whole study. And now, please, if there's any questions, I would love to entertain them.
Linda, thank you so much. It's great to hear about your research and kind of the takeaways you have. We have a few questions from the audience. We're going to have our team here pose some of them, and feel free to discuss.
Great. So one of the questions, and you mentioned this in sort of your wrap-up, just around reassuring employees that it's okay to volunteer and that they're not jeopardizing their job or job security. Question is, do you have sort of more specific ideas on how to make employees feel more comfortable about taking time off to volunteer, or not even taking time off, just volunteering?
Yeah, I mean, I have some, and then I would love to hear from the audience, because I'm sure they have very good ideas as well. But I would think that even in, if you have some type of team meeting, that would be terrific, where it would be made very clear to employees that this is something, again, that the company values. Any type of communication from management that would talk about how important it is to volunteer and how much the company approves and recognizes and endorses what employees are doing. If a company has a town hall meeting, to have a senior manager address it there. I think I just think any way that a company can communicate that this is important, and then of course ultimately, I mean, if that is part of your performance evaluation, then that definitely reinforces that this is something that the company cares about and wants their employees to participate in. But if it's okay, I would love to open it up to the audience and see if they have any other ideas.
Sure. If any of the audience members want to enter into their question box, we can either we can try to unmute you, or we will just read the responses. And while we're doing that, Linda, we have another question. Lauren from our team will pose this one.
So the question is, at the beginning of your talk, you touched on the ideas of why volunteering is important to employees, and the top one was because the cause was important to the employee personally. When companies are setting up their programs, do you think that it's important for the company to talk to their employees and survey their employees and find out what their passions are to kind of build the program around them, or stay focused on what the company values and the company mission?
That's a wonderful question, and so let me see if I can approach it from two different perspectives. One is whether or not a company wants to make their volunteer program strategic and how strategic they want to make it. And by strategic, what I mean is that it aligns with the company's business goals and it aligns with perhaps their corporate giving. So as a company, for example, they, if it's a healthcare company, then presumably a lot of their giving is in the area of health and social services, and they may say that we therefore want to direct our volunteerism in those particular areas. And so for company-sponsored events, it may be that you want to do many, that absolutely focus on this. But what happens is that there are clearly going to be employees who feel that that's not something that they care about, and what they really want to do, which our research has shown, is participate in outdoor activities. And many of them really love to do cleanups and planting things, and environmental issues are, we know, very important to some of the younger employees. So now the question is, what do we do? Do we move away from what our strategy is in order to incorporate what these employees want to do? And so I don't have a definitive answer for that because, again, it really depends on how strategic the company wants to be. So you could say, for example, that if we're going to do 4 company-sponsored events a year, 1 a quarter, that perhaps 2 of the 4 would be in the healthcare area because, again, that's where our strategic direction is. And then maybe we would have 2 that represent the interests of our employees, so that if someone really doesn't want to do something in healthcare, although we do know that the company's cause is number 4 on the list, and so therefore still pretty important, but for those others, we do offer them some options. And so that's probably what I would suggest, is that at least half be very strategic or more, but do include some options for those people so that you can engage them in an activity. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yep, there's another one, again, kind of asking to drill into some specific examples. The comment is that they agree that more information should be given to employees on the impact of volunteering on the nonprofit itself, and how would you recommend communicating that in general to employees to get them more engaged and interested in the program?
Well, communication is the biggest, or one of the biggest challenges that the companies have. And as I started to allude to earlier, companies are coming up with many different sort of types, maybe innovative types of communication because they've got to get through the clutter. We know that employees often don't read the email. So even if we do have these more motivational types of communications where they're really talking about what difference they're making, doesn't necessarily mean that employees are going to read the email. So yes, that challenge still exists. I would use as many different types of communication modes as you can. I mean, some of the ones that work well, for example, are if you have a TV monitor in an elevator, and you know that there you have a captive audience, and you could put some of the more motivational type things up there. You know, this is a difference that our volunteers made. We helped these many people, or you know, even having a quote from somebody that was helped by this volunteer event would be terrific. Putting it on the website would be great. It would be, but putting it in a place that's prominent, because the problem with any type of website or intranet or internet is that it's a passive form of communication. People have to seek it out. So again, if it's something that comes up immediately, that would be terrific. If you could get people to talk about it, but I would have to leave that up to the various volunteer managers to figure out what seems to work best with their population. But once you figure out how to communicate it, what you communicate is really what we're focusing on. And again, it's really talking. It's pulling at the heartstrings. We know that that's the best way to get people involved. We've seen it with senior managers. It's the manager that you can't get involved, and then you take him to an event, and he reaches the children and comes back so motivated and willing to get other people involved. So that's the message. How that message gets out there, I think, is going to vary depending on each company and with the particular challenges that you have. So, for example, if you've got a huge blue-collar group that is not at corporate headquarters very often, then yeah, you may be restricted to emails or to some type of paper type of messaging, or put it in with pay stubs if people aren't getting automatic deposits. So I don't know the best way, to be honest, because every company is different, but I do know that the best type of messaging is the one that talks about impact.
Great, thank you. Another one that's come in is a question just about around the research that you did and whether there was any differentiation between company-organized events versus employees volunteering on their own time and sort of finding the organization or interest area that they're most interested in, and if you think that could have a different, if the research would be different if it were based on company-organized, company-sponsored events versus things that were open to employees to find on their own.
Well, this research really focused on company-sponsored events because, that's clearly what volunteer managers do, and we really wanted to know what employees were feeling about the opportunities that the companies were providing them. The only thing that we addressed is the Dollars for Doers program, which clearly takes place on employees' own time, and whether or not they're using those programs. But the reason why we didn't really focus on what employees do on their own time is because we have no control over that. And yes, there are companies that offer sort of advice or will present opportunities that employees can then choose to follow up on their own time, or they'll send them to a website like VolunteerMatch, and they can try and find an organization in their community that they care about. So those kinds of things do happen, but that wasn't the focus of this at all. It was really what can we as managers in companies do to try and engage our employees, and does that engagement look different today because of the economic crisis we're in versus a few years ago, when we were more flush and employees weren't feeling as concerned about job preservation.
Great, thank you.
And then we have one more question for you. what do you think the biggest differences or the biggest deciding factors between companies who have a lot of engagement in the employee volunteering versus companies who don't get a lot of engagement from the employee side?
That's a very good question. You know, it's something that we didn't really look at, which is, and perhaps maybe we should re-look at some of the data in terms of, you know, participation rates and which companies seem to be more successful versus others. You know, other research that we have done have looked at best practices and you know, sort of, you know, how to recognize employees and how to get them motivated and whatever. So that was not really something that was the focus of this research. But if anybody is interested in that, they can go on my website, and there are lots of different studies on that. In particular, there's one called Trends in Best Practices in Corporate Community Involvement, and in that one, it does talk about sort of the trends and the best practices in terms of increased participation rates. So I would suggest that they do that, but this research did not look at that.
Great, thanks, Linda. Another question around the example you gave with Nationwide, and the question is just if you have any examples of kind of some of the sample communications they were using before they did the survey and research into what would resonate more with their employees versus afterwards. And just to sort of add to that, Nationwide is a client of VolunteerMatch's, so we can also certainly reach out to them to see if they're able to share some of that information. But Linda, just curious if you know of any of it offhand.
I believe that they were using emails, but I'm not sure if they used anything beyond emails. So yes, that would be wonderful if you could reach out to them and you know, sort of get more of an inventory of what they used.
Great, thanks. And then another one, just kind of as the economy starts to recover, how do you see volunteering being impacted by it?
Yeah, another great question. We're not seeing it changing that much, quite truthfully. The economy is beginning to improve, but we know that it is a jobless recovery. So people are still very frightened, you know, when it comes to their jobs. We know that people are still losing jobs. So I don't think that we're there yet. I think in terms of the economy and you know, perhaps companies' profits are increasing, but we also know that they're not hiring. I mean, the people are they're just really scared. And so as a result, I'm from, you know, just talking to my clients and whatnot, I'm not seeing any changes. In fact, some of my clients are really still cutting back. So the numbers, you know, are out there, but I'm not seeing evidence of it in terms of at least the clients that I've been working with. But I would love to throw that out to the audience and to see whether or not in their companies they're seeing any loosening up, or if they're seeing anything that's impacting their volunteer programs.
Great. And then another question in the queue is, are you seeing more companies shifting to Dollars for Doers programs over more traditional giving?
I'm seeing a lot of companies, I'm seeing two things. And it's not just the Dollars for Doers, it's also the matching gifts. What we're seeing is that companies are cutting back on matching gifts. And I think some of them are moving more towards a Dollars for Doers program, which I personally am very much in favor of, because, and then this is just a Linda thing, but I find that matching gifts in some respects is a bit of an elitist program, in that, you know, you need to be able to have money to get the match, and in our tough economic times, many people don't have as much discretionary income, whereas some of them do have more time to volunteer. So we are seeing an increase, definitely, in the number of Dollars for Doers programs that companies are offering. And we're also seeing sort of out-of-the-box thinking, you know, in terms of Dollars for Doers programs, which is great. So different versions are coming on board, sort of based on the economy and what companies can afford, and in some cases, at least one of the things that that I'm suggesting is that maybe we want to start a little bit lower because employees don't necessarily have as much time. So, starting at a 40-hour commitment may not be sending the right message at this time.
Great. Thank you so much, Linda. At this point, we'll wrap it up, and for the audience, do check back for the next webinars coming up. The April webinar is actually on Dollars for Doers. We'll have Bea Vocalando leading a discussion with some of our clients. Linda, if there are any final thoughts or conclusions you'd like to leave the audience with, we'd love to hear from you, and then we'll close it up.
No, I just would like to say that if anybody has any questions about the slides, and I know that you're going to make them available, or if there's anything you wanted to know about the research that we didn't get an opportunity to talk about, my contact information was up there, and please feel free to call me or email me. I'm more than happy to respond to any questions you might have.
Great. Thanks, Linda. And we will be sending the slides out after, as well as have a recording available. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.